Imagine being just 14 years old, living a normal life in your neighborhood, until one night, everything changes. A single accusation, whispered in fear and fueled by racism, can turn a boy into a criminal overnight. This is the story of Kevin Richardson, a black teen who was wrongfully accused, convicted, and sentenced to prison for a crime he didn't commit. But beyond the headlines and the harsh gavel lies a deeper truth, a story of resilience, injustice, and the fight for redemption in a system built to fail boys like him. What really happened that night? And what does his story tell us about America's long struggle with race and justice? Before moving deep into story, subscribe my channel and press the bell icon for more such videos. In the humid heat of a New York summer night in 1989, 14-year-old Kevin Richardson was just a kid trying to live an ordinary life in the Queens neighborhood where he had grown up. He had the dreams of any boy his age. To play basketball, to finish school, to maybe one day escape the narrow, sometimes suffocating streets he called home. That night, Kevin was with a group of friends, wandering through the park after a long day of street games and neighborhood chatter, their laughter echoing faintly beneath the city's cold street lamps. But their youthful freedom was about to be shattered by an accusation so devastating, so rooted in the racial fears and prejudices of the time, that it would consume Kevin's life and the lives of 4 other boys for years to come. It began with a scream, sharp, piercing, cutting through the quiet dusk. A jogger had been attacked in Central Park, a white woman left battered and terrified. The city's press exploded with headlines that screamed danger and demanded swift justice. Within hours, 5 black and Latino teenagers, including Kevin, were swept up by the police, their lives forever altered by the weight of an accusation they did not commit. The officers who questioned them were relentless, their faces hard, their voices unyielding. In cold, sterile interrogation rooms, Kevin and the others faced hours of grilling, intimidation, and false promises. "Just tell us what happened, and you'll get out," they were told repeatedly. Fear and exhaustion made them vulnerable, and eventually, coerced confessions spilled from their lips, stories fabricated under duress, inconsistent and riddled with contradictions, but enough to feed the frenzy of a city. The courtroom was no sanctuary. The boys, barely more than children, faced a justice system that saw them not as youths but as threats. The prosecutor painted them as monsters, a wolf pack, preying on innocent victims, appealing to the city's darkest fears about race and crime. Despite the absence of physical evidence tying them to the crime scene and glaring discrepancies in their confessions, the jury convicted them. The sentences handed down were brutal, years behind bars for crimes they never committed. In prison, Kevin's world narrowed to cold metal bars and endless nights of anxiety and pain. But within that darkness, a fierce light of resilience grew. He studied law through prison books, wrote letters to anyone who would listen, and clung to the belief that the truth would someday surface. Outside, the city that had condemned them slowly shifted. A determined lawyer named Linda managed to uncover new evidence. A confession from the actual attacker, a man whose violent past was well known but had been ignored in the rush to convict the boys. DNA tests confirmed what the boys had always insisted: they were innocent. After nearly a decade of fighting, Kevin and his friends were exonerated, released back into a world that had changed without them, yet still held the scars of injustice. The relief of freedom was tempered by the pain of lost years and the burden of stigma. Kevin's story did not end with his release. He became a voice for justice, speaking out against the racial biases embedded in the criminal justice system. His courage inspired others to question the narratives fed by fear and prejudice. Though the wounds of wrongful imprisonment never fully healed, his resilience transformed tragedy into a powerful call for change. The city learned slowly that justice demands more than swift convictions. It requires truth, fairness, and the courage to confront uncomfortable realities about race and power in America. The night the police came for Kevin, the city was already heavy with tension. His mother, Gloria, was sitting at the kitchen table, folding laundry and humming softly, the kind of normalcy she tried to keep alive despite the grinding hardships of their neighborhood. When the doorbell rang late, she opened it to the harsh glare of flashing lights and stern faces. Is my son in trouble? She asked, her voice trembling. But no one answered gently. They pushed past her, cold and unyielding, and within minutes, Kevin was being pulled from his bed, still half asleep and confused. The chill in the air was nothing compared to the freeze that took hold in his chest. "Mom, I didn't do anything," he whispered, clutching the thin blanket that had been his only comfort. But his words drifted into the cold night like a fragile hope. At the precinct, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Kevin sat alone in a windowless room. The clock's second hand seemed to mock him, dragging the night endlessly on. 2 detectives entered, one lean and sharp-eyed, the other burly and impatient. "You're gonna tell us what happened, kid," the sharp-eyed one said. Kevin's heart pounded, fear and confusion swirling in his gut. "I wasn't there," he said quietly. "I was at home." But the detectives had no interest in his story. Instead, they leaned in closer, their voices dropping to menacing whispers. "You can make this easier on yourself. Just admit you were there. Tell the truth. We know you were there." Hours passed. The detectives circled like vultures, wearing down the boys' defenses with a mix of threats and false promises. When Kevin finally nodded, telling them what they wanted to hear, he didn't realize it was the moment his life would fracture forever. News of the arrest exploded across the city. The media painted the boys as predators lurking in the shadows of Central Park, fueling a climate of fear and anger. Billboards and newspaper headlines demanded justice swiftly, and the system responded with harshness. The courtroom was a theater of fear and prejudice. Kevin sat at the defense table, his young face etched with worry, while the prosecutor's voice rang out with venomous certainty. "These boys represent the very real danger our city faces," he told the jury, his words laced with racial undertones no one dared challenge. Witnesses were few, evidence thin, but the boys' coerced confessions filled the courtroom like iron chains, binding them to guilt. Kevin's lawyer, a young public defender overwhelmed by the weight of the case and the city's prejudices, did what she could but fought a losing battle. Conviction came swift and brutal. Kevin and his friends were sentenced to years in prison. The judge's gavel echoed like a death knell, silencing any hope. As Kevin was led away in shackles, his eyes met his mother's, her tears silent but heavy with despair. In that moment, a silent vow was made between them: no matter what, Kevin's truth would not be buried. Prison was a world of cold concrete and hostile eyes. At first, Kevin felt crushed, swallowed by despair. The walls around him seemed to close tighter with each passing day. But slowly, a fire ignited inside him, a fierce refusal to be broken by injustice. He devoured books on law and history, taught himself to write, and reached out with letters that carried his plea for justice beyond the prison walls. His mind became his refuge, and his resolve a shield. In the darkest moments, when hopelessness clawed at his soul, memories of his mother's prayers and his own dreams kept him going. He was not just a prisoner of bars but of a broken system, yet he refused. Outside, the city's narrative began to shift as cracks in the prosecution's case emerged. A young civil rights lawyer named Linda Taylor took up Kevin's cause, digging deep into the shadows the case had left untouched. She uncovered inconsistencies, witnesses who had been overlooked, and most damningly, a confession from a man with a violent past who admitted to the attack. DNA evidence, previously ignored, matched the real perpetrator, not Kevin or his friends. Each revelation was a beacon of hope, a step toward undoing the years of damage. The legal battles were fierce, the opposition relentless, but Linda's dedication never wavered. For Kevin and his family, each victory felt like a breath of air after suffocating underwater. When the day finally came for Kevin's release, the world outside felt strange and distant. The streets had changed, yet the scars he carried were raw and visible. The freedom was bittersweet, his innocence restored, but the years lost could never be returned. He reunited with his mother, now grayer but steadfast, and the embrace they shared was both a healing balm and a reminder of what had been stolen. Kevin knew his fight was not over. The injustice that nearly destroyed him was a reflection of a society still grappling with deep-seated racial bias. He vowed to use his voice, his story, to fight for those who could not, to demand a justice system that sees the truth beyond color and fear. Kevin's journey from a frightened boy to a symbol of resilience became a powerful testament to the human spirit's ability to endure. His story resonated far beyond the city limits, inspiring activists, lawmakers, and ordinary citizens alike. It was a painful reminder that behind every statistic, every headline, lies a human life, one deserving of dignity, fairness, and hope. And though the wounds inflicted by injustice might never fully fade, Kevin's courage shone as a beacon, lighting a path to a brutal test of Kevin's spirit. Each day was a cold reminder of a life stolen by injustice. The sound of footsteps echoed down sterile hallways, a harsh cadence marking time he could never get back. But Kevin refused to be swallowed by despair. In the claustrophobic darkness of his cell, he found solace in books, warm copies of legal texts, history tomes, and novels that took him far beyond the gray concrete. Every page turned was a rebellion, a claim to the freedom he was denied. The guards were often indifferent or cruel, and the other inmates wary of the young boy caught in a web not his own, but Kevin's resolve hardened with each passing day. He wrote letters, hundreds of them, to lawyers, civil rights groups, journalists, anyone who might listen. Some went unanswered, others brought sparks of hope. Through those small threads of connection, Kevin clung to the belief that the truth could not be buried forever. At night, he replayed the events over and over in his mind, the night of the accusation, the cold eyes of the detectives, the courtroom filled with murmurs and judgment. The faces of his friends, who shared the same nightmare, haunted him. They were all victims of a system that saw young Black and Latino boys as criminals before they were even proven innocent. But prison forged a new strength in Kevin. He learned to stand tall amid humiliation and hardship. When fights broke out, he stayed out of them, refusing to sink to violence. Instead, he became a quiet leader, someone others looked to for strength. He spoke about hope, about justice, about a life beyond those walls. It was a resilience born of fire, tempered in pain. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Kevin's mother fought her own battle. Gloria was a small woman with a heart large enough to carry the weight of their injustice. Every week she visited her son, her face a mask of quiet endurance. She had to endure whispered accusations from neighbors, the pitying stares, and the crushing loneliness of a mother separated from her child by a mountain of lies. But she never stopped believing. Every visit was a lifeline, a brief moment of connection where they shared stories, plans, and dreams of a day when Kevin would be free again. Gloria became an advocate, writing letters to newspapers, attending rallies, and meeting with activists. Her voice, once soft and unsure, grew stronger, fueled by a mother's unwavering love, and the breakthrough came unexpectedly. Linda Taylor, a sharp and relentless civil rights attorney, found a piece of evidence overlooked by the original investigation, a confession from a convicted criminal who matched the profile of the real attacker. Linda's dogged investigation uncovered how the police had rushed to judgment, relying on coerced confessions rather than evidence. DNA tests were retested, now confirming the boy's innocence. Linda fought through layers of bureaucratic resistance, public skepticism, and institutional inertia, driven by a belief that the truth mattered more than reputation or politics. Her dedication slowly shifted the tide. Appeals were filed, hearings held, and finally, after nearly a decade, the courts overturned Kevin's conviction. The moment the prison gates opened, Kevin stepped out into a world both familiar and alien. The sun was brighter than he remembered, the streets were busier, louder, and yet there was a profound silence in his soul. He had lost so much: years, youth, innocence. His family embraced him, tears streaming down their faces, but the joy was tinged with pain. Freedom was not the end, but the beginning of a new struggle. Kevin faced the daunting task of reclaiming a life interrupted, of finding his place in a society that had branded him a criminal despite his innocence. He carried the scars of injustice, but also a fierce determination to use his story as a weapon against the systemic racism that had nearly destroyed him. Kevin's journey became a beacon for others, proof that resilience could overcome even the darkest of injustices. he spoke publicly, sharing his experience to expose the deep flaws in the justice system. His voice echoed in courtrooms, classrooms, and community centers. Though the wounds of wrongful imprisonment never fully healed, Kevin transformed his pain into power, turning tragedy into a force for change. His story is a haunting reminder that justice is not a given, but a fight. A fight that demands courage, truth, and unwavering hope.